Welcome to the place where we learn about and learn from the leaders in our field who are powering human creativity. I am Aaron Dworkin, and this is Arts Engines. Thanks again for joining me here on Arts Engines. Today's guest is Mark Williams, who serves as CEO of the Toronto Symphony Orchestra. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hi, Aaron. So nice to see you again.
So it's so great to have you on the show. I obviously have been very lucky and honored to be able to see your work over literally decades and your leadership in the field and at, a number of orchestras, et cetera, and other organizations. But now I'd love to kind of talk to you about this role with the Toronto Symphony Orchestra. And first and foremost, if you could kind of just give the quick once over for our audience just of the TSO and kind of overall scope of programming. And then I wanted to kind of delve into kind of your administrative leadership and how you've been approaching it.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, it's a great pleasure to be here with you today and with your viewers. I always appreciate seeing you and appearing on this wonderful show. So, as you mentioned, yes, I'm the CEO of the Toronto Symphony Orchestra, and in that role, I mean, in a way, it's a conventional CEO role, which I would describe as supporting great artists making great music for a great community, right? At the highest level, I would say that's what my role is, and I'm very happy to be doing that. The Toronto Symphony Orchestra is actually in the middle of its 100th anniversary season. I seem to land at orchestras who are celebrating centennials, having been in San Francisco Symphony and the Cleveland Orchestra for their centennials. So I suppose at this point I should be an expert in this. But actually, that's a good point to say that even with having worked with three orchestras that are around 100 years old, they're all each so incredibly different because, of course, they're in different places. They're in different cities, different communities. And of course, an orchestra should be a reflection of that community if it's meant to serve that community. So it's been wonderful being here. The orchestra has a thriving subscription series, a pop series, a quite robust education and young people series, and a series that we're developing that's been going for a couple of years, but it's certainly expanding now, is a series of relaxed concerts that are directed toward neurodiverse children and their families. And this year we're going to have some of those for adults as well. So lots going on here up in Toronto, and snow, as you can see.
Absolutely. Well, so that is so awesome, and I love how you touched on your history with several obviously great orchestras. Are there aspects that as you came into Toronto were unique or different, that where no matter what orchestra you're leading anywhere, there are these kind of core components? But are there things that you have found that are unique in Toronto, either because of the international differential or other aspects that are unique to the community in Toronto?
It's been so interesting because, of course, you step into a role like this and being competent is really important, right? So I've worked, as you said, for some wonderful organizations, and I've had really spectacular mentorship. So I walked in the door, of course, a bit nervous, but knowing essentially how an orchestra works and feeling that I could function in this environment. What's been very special has been learning how the organization and the community are so different. I said to someone, I'm a reasonably well-traveled person, and yet I've never felt more American than working in Canada. And one would think that, right, the cultures are so very similar, but in fact, once you're here, of course, the nuance of how you lead in another culture has been it's been a wonderful learning experience. The ways that people communicate here are quite different. Expectations about hierarchy, all very, very different. And of course, just meeting this community, which is so incredibly diverse, right? I think Toronto has been named the most diverse city on the face of the earth. over 50% of the people who live in this city weren't born in Canada even. There is no visible majority. So operating a major cultural institution in a city like this is just obviously it's completely different. And it's great excitement and it's great opportunity.
That's so interesting. There's so many questions I have. So one kind of touching on that, in literally leading the orchestra in the most diverse city in the world, right? Obviously, especially over the last few years, diversity has become a very important issue to many American orchestras. Do you find there are similarities there in terms of opportunities and challenges or differences, or how, I'm curious how that compares to your experiences with American orchestras?
You know, I think that ultimately we're all trying to do the same thing, right? We want, you know, we're in this business because we love the music, we love producing it, and we love sharing it. I think we love seeing and experiencing how that music affects and changes and transfigures our audiences, right? And therefore, we want to reach the widest group of people. I mean, that is clear. I would say that what makes operating here a bit different is, at least coming from, let's say, Cleveland, where there is less diversity in a sense. There are fewer groups of people to serve on one level. And I'm, for example, I'm speaking about racial diversity. Whereas here, I mean, everyone is here. And so you have to really think quite differently about how you go about attacking that, right? One of the things, though, that I've noticed is, and this was quite interesting for me. We had an open house at the beginning of the season. We wanted it's a series of gifts that we're giving to the community for our centennial season, and we had the hall open for 4 hours. We had nearly 4,000 people who came into the hall and experienced activities for children and for adults. I mean, it was really wonderful. And then there was a free concert. And throughout the pre-concert activities and the concert, we made sure that we had music and artists that were reflective of our community. So we had, you know, Persian music, we had Jamaican music, we had, you know, Irish folk music, I mean, you name it. And in the concert, we had compositions that the Toronto Symphony Orchestra had commissioned from Indigenous composers, Persian Canadian, Mexican Canadian, and along with some classics as well. So it was a real mixed program. But I say all of this because before we played the piece by Afrin Mansouri, a Persian Canadian woman composer, she asked, and we agreed, to dedicate the piece to the women of Iran. And what I was so moved by was the audience went crazy. I mean, they just went absolutely over the moon for this. And I was looking around, and it wasn't because, you know, the house was full of a Persian audience. I mean, we had a very mixed audience. What I realized is multiculturalism is central to the idea of, to the ethos, to the beliefs of the city, that even though it's not my group of people, right? The fact that we are a city that embraces everyone, that wants everyone to be here, is important. So even that was a learning for me in terms of, okay, how do you then bring diversity to what we do to serve this community?
It's an incredible capturing of that culture, and which is so, I think, beautiful and exciting. And I've had such wonderful times, including in the Jamaican community in Toronto, which is so thriving. You talk about kind of the culture, you know, it's humorous. You know, I think that there's certainly stereotype that maybe Canadians are nicer than Americans or more polite, and so what I'm curious, while that might be a humorous stereotypes, that is when leaders come into or transition to a new organization, I find that sometimes they fight between, do I adjust to the existing culture, or do I bring and try and change or evolve that culture? And I'm curious, as a leader and thinking about the many people who watch our show who are in leadership roles at orchestras, presenters, et cetera, various companies, and how you have approached the cultural shift yourself as an administrator.
You know, you make a very good point, and I early on in my time here, I had this question for myself, right? Do I change, or do I ask them to change? But I'm an American, and I'd like to think that I'm a nice person, but I'm fairly direct, and I say what I think, and I'm pretty clear about that. And that, of course, we're painting in very broad strokes, but I find that the sentiment here is a little different. People are a little bit more guarded. They don't quite feel comfortable coming right out and maybe saying, "Hey, I think you, CEO, I think what you're doing here is wrong. We should go in a different direction." I got a really great piece of advice before I started this role, and that piece of advice was, seek to understand before being understood. And it was the best piece of advice I possibly could have gotten, because I think it helped me bridge that cultural divide. That I kept saying to myself, they'll get to know me, and they'll understand me, and they will understand what I mean and how I'm coming off. But right now, I need to focus on understanding them, understanding where they are coming from, what their experience is. I speak of the orchestra members, I speak of, my team, I speak of the board. And I can say 7 months in, that seems to be working quite well. And I think through that, they have come to understand me and understand when I say just what I think, that it's probably okay.
Well, that's awesome. And it just is also a testament to your leadership. And I absolutely I feel that is so relevant literally to every single one of our viewers in our audience, which is seek to understand before you are understood. That is so powerful, and I think so applicable in a host of settings.
Indeed.
Unfortunately, we are just about out of time, but I always like to ask of my guests, and sure, throughout this process in the past 7 months, there have been some times of challenge. And just as a leader, where do you go to? How do you find sources of either strength during tough times or inspiration when it seems like there might be some obstacles that can't be overcome?
Also, a great question, and I think it's something we don't talk about enough, right? I don't think we talk about the emotional toll of leadership. I don't think we talk about the stress of being of having the buck stop with you, of having people watching you, the critique there. First of all, I really believe in coaching. I think it's so important at every level to have a sounding board, someone with whom you can be completely honest, you can say anything, and they can give you good counsel. And I think that's different than mentorship. I really believe also in mentoring and mentorship. I've had wonderful mentors throughout my career, and I keep in touch with those people, and they give me great counsel. And the other side of it is, I mentor others, and sometimes, I think it's like being, like being an instrumental teacher. Sometimes you understand your craft better because you have to verbalize it and explain it to someone else. The last piece for me has been taking care of my body and finding time for myself. So I have a pretty intense exercise regimen, and just booking the time in my calendar, going to the gym, and just being in my own space gets me into a place where I think I have energy and I have depth to give to my organization.
Well, that is absolutely awesome. Offline, I'm going to have to find out what your regimen is so I can kind of bring it all together here myself. Need to do some work there. But Mark Williams, you truly are one of the arts engines who is powering human creativity in our world. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Aaron, for having me.